What's up guys, welcome back to the show. So the Normal Boots guys just voted Resident Evil 2 as the greatest PlayStation 1 game of all time, taking down other more inferior games such as Final Fantasy VII. And no, I'm not bitter about it. I am a little. But all that noise and the remake of it that's coming out in a couple days made me think that it's time that I finally gave the original a try. We're gonna review it like we always do, talk about each part of the game, rank them from the worst to the best, and then give an overall score at the end. Alright, let's do this. So, how's the gameplay? It's chunky? So I went in with the expectation of the kind of weird tank controls that everyone's always talking about Resident Evil 2 having, but to be honest, I think it might be easier to drive an actual tank through the tight corridors of a zombie-infested police department. I'm joking. Kinda. You get used to them pretty quick though, to be honest, and they become less of an issue and more like a personality quirk. In fact, I'd say it kind of even adds to the feeling of being a little bit out of control in a life-threatening situation, so it works in a way. The game's really forgiving with the shooting mechanic too, so as long as you're pointed in the right direction, you'll more likely than not hit your target, which is really considerate of the game. Thanks, game. But shooting stuff is only half of the battle. The constantly shifting perspectives, and of course the G-Virus that started this whole Zombo mess, warps all these regular environments into this horrifying maze. And as you're tripping over all these dead bodies, you'll start to notice all these really unique and really creative details. Being able to save at typewriters only if you have an ink ribbon is a stroke of survival horror genius. Because you're running back and forth through the same places so much, you're left to balance the risk or reward of saving too often or not enough. And it turns every moment of the game into a critical one because you know some zombo out there is waiting to 360 spear tackle you to death. All of it just piles up into this weird but awesome blend of horror, action, adventure, and even some moments that reminded me of my favorite point-and-click games as you puzzle your way deeper down into madness. I ended up feeling like this is less of a horror game and more just a really unique action game. I wasn't really ever scared, but I was tense pretty much throughout the whole thing. So what about the graphics? There's this scene in the movie Psycho that I still have nightmares about. No, not the shower scene, my fellow pervazoids. No, the scene I'm talking about is near the end of the film when the detective and the killer meet at the top of the stairs and Hitchcock uses this really bizarre, directly over the head camera angle. It's just something about it freaks the hell out of me. I can't really tell you why. Imagine then, to my pleasant surprise, my reaction when I realized that I'd just stumbled into a game that recreates that scene over and over again until I'm left weeping in the corner mumbling about my own mommy issues. I get it, Norman. I finally get it. My butt's still in the process of unclenching millimeter by millimeter because Resident Evil 2 found such a sinister and creative way of messing with my head that's way more effective than any shock or awe tactic that they could have employed on the screen. Instead, they leave it to your imagination, as they always seem to leave what's most horrifying and threatening just off the edge of the screen, and fear becomes a product of your own mind. It can get annoying though when the camera angle shifts unexpectedly and you kind of lose your orientation in any given room, and sometimes it leads to some cheap moments where the camera and tank controls get you into trouble that you probably wouldn't have otherwise. But it's used mostly to good effect. Listen, I love pre-rendered backgrounds and chunky character models with all of my heart, but there's really no denying that the game can look pretty dated in some ways. The stiff facial expressions and mouths that don't move when characters talk and them gesturing stiffly around at each other, I mean, it can look pretty old. But how about the story that it tells? So it goes like this. Umbrella Corp, fresh off their last catastrophic failure, is back at it again with a newly developed mutant strain, the G-Virus. Bada bing, bada boom. Zombos. Everywhere. It's almost like the real story already happened. It's over. The bad guys did an irreversibly bad thing, and now we're just here trying to survive the aftermath as we piece together what happened through short, stilted conversations and journal entries that we find lying around. In them, we catch small glimpses of life before the outbreak, like a man meeting a new friend to play chess with, or a secretary documenting odd and even violent behavior from her boss, and reports on the chief of police that slowly spell out the dastardly little role that he plays in the story. Pretty quick into the game, it becomes evident that it's less about stopping the whole event from happening and more about just saving whoever you can. And some really twisted and tragic events make the desperate effort to save even just one single person worth every last ounce of your energy. It is awkwardly told, and some of that good old 90s video game dialogue is used to get the narrative moving, but it's just like a campy zombie movie. You don't really need it to be a Shakespearean masterwork for it to be enjoyable. I would have liked a few more moments of storytelling though, because when it decides to give you something interesting to chew on, it's pretty good. It doesn't do a ton to deviate from the standard zombie plot, so don't expect anything all that new from it. It's zombies. The characters. The two leading characters are Claire, the cool biker girl who slays zombors with considerable aplomb on her search for her brother, and Leon, a fresh new recruit on his first day on assignment in Raccoon City, and also something of a ladies' man. See, look, they can't keep their hands off him. I honestly wish I were like half as cool as Leon. He's like diving in front of bullets to save people he just barely met and then totally makes out with this girl he met probably a half hour before and said 10 words to. Each of the two main characters has their own playable path through the game too, and it's cool playing through each path at least once so you can see little traces of the other as you make your way through the same environments and meet different people and go through the same events with different perspectives. I mean, these people are just good people trying to do the right thing, so it's easy to connect with them. It mostly feels kind of like a stock action movie cast with the cool leading man and cute leading lady, and the voice acting is bad, but in that mostly great kind of way. Like each individual word was recorded on a different day in a different location. I mean, it's just amazing. But it fits the campy and simple charm of the game. For how few characters and character interactions there are, it does a surprisingly good job at making you feel sympathy for them. Probably the most memorable moment in the game for me was when the dumb little girl Sherry gets attacked by a big ol' zombie, and I want to avoid spoilers here, but it's such a cruel twist of fate as to who does it to her and how. And now all of a sudden I'm scared to death at the prospect that I might have to kill, or at the very least watch this little sweet innocent girl turn into a Zamboni. Yeah, she's dumb, but she's the kind of dumb that you see in B-list horror movies. Like the oddly fearless little girl who's doing like spin moves around zombo dogs and stiff-arming the undead all over the place. As far as the villains go, there are a couple. There's Chief Irons, who's a terrible person, and even before you ever meet him, you learn just about how awful of a person he is through diary entries. Then you finally meet him in his office, and he has this beautiful but dead woman laid across his desk, who obviously wasn't a zombie before she died, and you're like, okay, this dude's a maniac. It's just such a great moment of visual storytelling. As for the actual evil corporation Umbrella, there's like this power scientist couple running around trying to ruin everything, and you get to deal with them too. So yeah, the characters are pretty decent. How about the music? It's good. I mean, it's pretty much the expected horror game soundtrack. There's some really nice, haunting, droning tracks packed with reverb and stringed tracks climbing and crescendoing into a vacuous, echoed silence. I don't know. I don't know how to talk about music, to be honest. But like I said, it's the expected horror game soundtrack, more or less, with dissonant chords with eerie melodies punctuated by strange sound effects and cymbal stings, and even some futuristic elements of like synths pattering around over or under the music that kind of get your heart rate up. The cool thing, I think, is how easily it changes from subtle background horror music into an in-your-face action track, or maybe even over into a pretty little piano piece. I mean, it keeps you on your toes. You don't really ever know which way it's gonna go. Just like those zombie dogs who, speaking of sound and music, make this heartbreaking little yip every time you shoot them. And this game seriously takes pleasure in having you shoot zombo dogs, because it takes like 1,000,000 bullets to take each of them down. There's like this hallway where there's like 5 zombie dogs, and it took me like a half hour of shooting these poor dogs and hearing them yip to get through it. It's heartbreaking. And like any good horror game, Resident Evil 2 makes great use of silence. Mostly to make your ears perk up for any sound that'll give you warning of approaching danger, and then you take that step and it hits you with one of those nauseating Dutch angles and you just know you're about to get reamed by some zombo dog from around the corner. Oh! The blasts that your guns make are so visceral and loud too, almost scary themselves because they're layered over silence a lot of times. Every time I fired a round it made me wince because I too wanted to be quiet so that the zombies didn't know where I was. I mean, just really great sounds in this game, from the guns to the sound of the zombies munching on your legs and stuff. All in all, the game's music and sound design is the kind that pretty much makes you assume the worst is about to happen in every situation you're in. So it's good, if a little too samey and in the background for good stretches of the game. Okay, now it's time for final judgments. In last place is the story. At the end of the day, it's about a zombie outbreak. Not the most original plot, and pretty sparsely told. In fourth place is the gameplay. The tank controls are pretty rough, but it had some really cool twists on some old tried and true mechanics. In third place is the music. It's haunting and has a couple of standout tracks that really accentuate the high octane moments of the game. Plus the sound design is fantastic. In second place are the characters. Out of everything that the game does, they just brought out the biggest emotional response for me. And in first place are the visuals. Maybe a controversial take, but there are just so many cool environments and this game takes you to so many interesting places. Plus, it has a super creative way of presenting them with all the shifting angles and shots. Awesome zombie and enemy designs too. I mean, this game's great. It really is just great. And because I think that this game is going to be so different and removed from the remake that it'll stand on its own as a game worth playing, even after its remake comes out. So our scoring system works on the assumption that a 5 out of 10 is a perfectly average, playable game. So our final score of a solid 7 out of 10 puts it way above average and into that auto recommendation territory. Compared to the scores that the critics gave it though, I'd say that this game is maybe a little overrated. But still a game that I'd recommend to anybody. I mean, critical scores are stupid anyways. And that's it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.